All right. Welcome. Let's see, what is it? It's Thursday, August 20th, 7 p.m. or 7:01 p.m. Eastern Standard, and the other times that are all the other times in the world. I know, it's a profound statement. That is me. Welcome to the Religious Scrupulosity OCD Town Hall. My name is Ethan. As always, we like to give you a moment to get in, get settled, grab a non-alcoholic beverage, and have a seat. So as always, please let us know you're here. Say hello, where you're from. We love to give shout outs, and we'll get started in the next, I think, minute and a half. We have a really fantastic panel for you. And I know this is a topic that everybody's really wanted to talk about. It's a very necessary topic and a very misunderstood topic and a very layered topic and all of those things. So we're really excited to dive in with you all. So as soon as I start seeing some questions or at least some statements pop up here. I'm going to drink water, pretend to be exhausted. Oh, I've been talking so much. Hi, Olivia and Tracy. We're from Chesterfield. Jamie in Orange County. Hello, Jamie. Where are you in Orange County? There's Deirdre. How are you, Deirdre? Deirdre, I feel like I know you so well at this point. You don't even need to say where you're from, because I always think of Patrick Swayze, but it's Swansea, or Swansea. Oh, now I'm totally torn. I have no idea. Okay, so there's my girlfriend, Katie. Hello, Katie. Katie Ted is actually an ordained minister. She's a chaplain in a private school. Placentia. Okay, cool. Cool. Swan Z. All right, excellent. I feel better about myself now. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds. We jumped on a little bit late, so I want to give it a full 2 minutes just to give everybody. As always, welcome. If you're just here, this is Religious Scrupulosity Town Hall. Hey, Shannon from Georgia. We have a phenomenal panel with tons of point of views, expert, clinical, lived experience. We're very excited about this. This is a very important conversation to have, as they all are. There'll probably be multiple volumes of this conversation. We have a feeling there'll be a lot of questions, so feel free to ask. We're going to do some talking up front and then jump to Q&A for the back hour. If you want to go ahead, we do go in order. I'm going to say this for the first time, so if you want to make sure you get a question in, feel free to ask a question. Initially, we will get to it probably about 7:30. So with that, let's go ahead and get rolling. My name is Ethan. I'm the National Ambassador for the International OCD Foundation, which simply means that I won't shut up about OCD. And you've clearly learned that since March. I keep changing what that means, and I think that's probably the most accurate definition of what I'm doing at this point. So let me just quickly get through the housekeeping, and then I'd love to introduce our phenomenal panel, and we'll get rolling. This town hall is intended to serve as educational content. It is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline and should not be used if you are in distress or feel unsafe. If you are in crisis or ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room, call 911, or call the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 800-273-8255. As always, I always say this, we always want to be very kind and very respectful. This particular subject, along with other taboo, sexual violence, intrusive thoughts, there's going to be a lot of very personal conversation, a very candid conversation, maybe even lots of uncomfortable conversation. We like to create as safe a space as possible. I want to remind everybody, though, that this is a public forum, that it will be posted on social, on Facebook and YouTube for other people to watch later and learn from. So, if you are concerned or worried, don't post it. But we've had very few issues, so feel like this is safe. And I can tell you that everybody on here is in support of all of us. And if not, we'll boot you. So be respectful. And yes, so that is everything. So with that, Deirdre wrote, hi, Tawanna, Micah, and Ted. So I think that's a good opening to introduce our panel. So first we'll start with Ted Witzig, or Dr. Ted, or Dr. Witzig, or Dr. Junior. I don't know.
Just Ted's fine.
Okay, T-Money. Here we go. So Ted serves as the clinical director of the Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. in where his clinical practice focuses on anxiety and mood disorders. He specializes in anxiety disorders with an emphasis on OCD, scrupulosity, and primarily obsessional forms of OCD. He's also a minister in the Apostolic Church. Am I saying that right? Yeah, I am saying that right. Sorry.
Apostolic. Yep.
Is it really? Oh,
Yep,
my girlfriend's going to kill me. I should have asked you beforehand.
It's all right. It's all right.
This Jew feels shame. Apostolic Christian Church. I'm really going to get yelled at. She's probably going to text me now. Apostolic Christian Church of America. His roles as clinical psychologist and pastor give him a special desire to help those whose OCD has become intertwined and religious and moral matters. So thank you so much, Ted, for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much.
We're super excited. I've seen you speak, and I'm excited for your input and intake on all of this. Next, just below me is Tawanna Watson. On a personal note, I've watched Tawanna. I hate to say she's new on the scene, but I know that's weird to say. And I don't want to make this a scene, but let's just say that she's come out strong and passionate and vibrant in her advocacy, and we in the community really appreciate it and embrace her in her journey. So I'll read her bio, and she added some really interesting other points. So Tawanna lives in Cleveland, Ohio. She was diagnosed with OCD PTSD. She's the founder of My Sister's Keeper, which is Northeast Ohio. Sorry, My Sister's Keeper of Northeast Ohio, which is a 501c4 organization that works toward educating and lobbying on the issues of minority mental health to the state legislature and helping minority women and minority children, teens, get the resources that they need to improve their mental health. She's a lobbyist in the state of Ohio for minority mental health and women's issues. She is certified peer support specialist for the state of Ohio and runs a virtual support group for individuals suffering from OCD, PTSD specifically, but also any anxiety disorder every Tuesday night, which we could probably get some more information on that as well if you guys want to join. She also has a podcast called My Sister's Keeper that talks about minority mental health as it affects African-American women. At first, the podcast was about her and her experiences, but it grew fast and now is changing formats. She's also a writer, self-published mental health struggles, and a poetic memorial, and working on what a wonderful medium to express yourself in. Is also working on a trilogy series in the fiction area. By day, she's an accountant for a Fortune 500 company. She's currently an MFA seeking student at Cleveland State University. She's basically very bored day to day.
Doesn't sound like it to me.
Nothing going on. Lots of time for naps. And then I want to add, she shared this, and I want to share this with you because so she wrote, I'm going to read this in her words because it's first person. So she wrote, I am married to David, my high school sweetheart, with 7 children and 7 grandchildren. My father is a pastor, a Baptist pastor from down south, and does not believe in mental health. Therefore, in my family, I'm the black sheep, even though mental health issues run rampant in my family and children. It is my goal to put a minority face on mental health to break stigma and barriers that for minorities. I also want to speak my truth about my journey with my own mental health, and at the beginning of this journey, how I was misdiagnosed and shamed by my father's congregation, etc. So Tawanna, thank you so much for being here and for sharing. Last but certainly not least, we have Micah in Iowa. You may remember Micah from our affiliate Town Hall. Micah graduated from high school in 2008 at the top of his class with nothing but a promising future. However, when his OCD and comorbid hoarding disorder and depression became symptomatic shortly thereafter, he soon found himself unable to complete college, which I can relate to, or retain steady employment. After many years of disillusionment, Micah began to slowly gain traction in his life after several months of ERP therapy in a partial hospitalization setting. Now he is passionate about advocating for those afflicted with mental health issues, and is in the process of starting his own business and helping the IOCDF launch an affiliate chapter in Iowa. So Micah, thank you so much for being here.
Sure thing.
We're very grateful to have all of you here. Very excited to have all of you here, and let's dive right in. So first of all, I'd love to just open to some intros in your own words. I think some basics, maybe Ted, from your end on maybe the definition of religious scrupulosity and how you see it manifest, and kind of where you come from in your space.
Sure. So I'll give you a textbook definition of scrupulosity first, and it's a subtype of OCD where we have obsessions, compulsions that contain religious themes, hypermorality, pathological doubt and worry about sin. That's a big one that gets a lot of people, and excessive religious behavior. So what ends up happening is it's OCD that entwines in somebody's religious culture, and most of the time, what you'll see is that the OCD will shape itself into whatever kind of religious background the person has. Okay, so if somebody, I'm a pastor from and a psychologist, but I work mostly out of a Christian frame of reference and a lot with Protestant Christians. And so I end up seeing OCD that wraps itself around the doctrine and practices in that culture in that area. Again, if it shows up differently in Orthodox Judaism or Catholicism or other different ways of manifesting. So the thing to remember here is that OCD grabs onto the things that we care about in this space, and so most of the time when we're looking at religious topics, people are trying to be good people. They're trying to love people. They're trying to be kind. They're trying to be pure. They're trying, those kind of things, and OCD is right there to say, yeah, but what if you're not? Or what if this or what if that? And so anyway, what I look at it as is OCD is taking something that is at the core of the person and really creating a ton of uncertainty and fear, and it accidentally ends up kind of taking over the person's faith. So they're not actually practicing a lot of times what they actually believe, just because they're really doing obsessions and compulsions.
Thank you so much, Ted. I appreciate that. I actually want to, I think Caroline, I don't know if she's still here, but I just want to read her comment because it's relatable. She wrote, hi, thanks for doing this topic. I can't stay, but we'll listen tomorrow. I feel so lonely in church. I feel like I don't know how to engage with religious ideas anymore without slipping into scrupulosity. I have a hard time holding on to the idea that scrupulosity is maladaptive and not the ideal. So I think that's very relatable from what we're talking about. Tawanna, please give us a little insight into your experience, or just intro, anything you'd like to say about this subject.
Well, when I after I was misdiagnosed and I started going to church because everybody told me that's what I was supposed to do, I started praying. I even bought a little book by Joyce Myers with all these different prayers in it, and I will pray certain prayers in the morning to make sure I had a good day, certain prayers at night to make sure I woke up and didn't die at night. And if I didn't pray these prayers, I was totally out of whack. And then I would have to go to church Monday, Wednesday, Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday when they had church. If I missed church, God was going to kill me. And it got to the point where it was really, really horrible for me, because I was pretty much living for God. I would pray for hours. And my kids used to be, I'll go in my room, close the door and pray. And my kids used to knock on the door because they wanted food. And I was like, well, I know I have to finish praying. I have to finish praying. And it got to the point where it was really, really ridiculous for me. And now looking back, I could see it was ridiculous. But then I thought I needed that to survive and to stop bad things from happening.
How far back did you see it start affecting your life?
When I was little. But I remember a time when I was on the school bus, I was around 11, 12. I tell everybody my mind split. That's when I started hearing the intrusive thoughts. And my mind split, I started hearing these thoughts. And at first I thought it was my conscious. I was younger. I didn't know. I thought it was my conscious. But then looking back now, I could see I started doing little things, little rituals, like checking the door or not walking around the house with my socks on and not barefoot because I thought I was going to catch something. And it just progressed from there. But my mother and them, they always told me I was strange. So I kind of thought, oh, well, I'm just strange. I just do strange things. But that was not the case. And then as I got older and started having kids, I noticed something was wrong with me. And you know what's wrong if something's not right with you. So I went to a doctor, and I'm not going to say her name on here, but I went to the doctor. She misdiagnosed me with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. She misdiagnosed me with a couple of different disorders and put me on a bunch of medications. And my kids were small at the time. So all I did was sleep I was a zombie, so I don't recommend this for anybody on here. I took myself off that medication, and then that's when I'm like, I need help. And that's when everybody was like, you need to go to church. You need Jesus. You don't need that medicine. That medicine is not good for you. There's no such thing as psychiatry. That's the devil. You need Jesus. And that's what I did. And I was doing that up until 2017, where I couldn't even leave my house. It got to the point where I was so afraid to leave my house that, I was forced to go to the Cleveland Clinic, and that's where I got the right diagnosis and the right treatment plan.
Although, go ahead, Tawanna.
I just don't want anybody else. And I've talked through my organization and just being out on the street talking to random people. I just don't want anybody else who look like me to go through it. And there are many people that has the same thing as I do, that don't know where to get the help from. They can't afford the help. Or they are discriminated against when they go to therapy. And I know this is off topic, but I got to mention this. I have good insurance because I work for a good company. Before I went to the Cleveland Clinic, before my breakdown, I went to a private therapist. I walked in there. The receptionist looked at me and said, "We don't take Medicaid." I don't have Medicaid. I have United Healthcare. I have good insurance. So for her to just look at me and say that was wrong. Mm-hmm. And I'm quite sure that's happening to other people besides me. And I wanted to stop. That's it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. I think a word that comes to mind when hearing you speak is fierce. Fierce is a great word. You are fierce. I also want to mention, for those that are on, is that thank you, Fran, at 7:10 p.m. in the comments posted her nonprofit, mysisterskeeperohio.org. Please be sure to check it out. And I also want to mention we will be getting to questions in probably 20-ish minutes. So please feel free to load the comment thread with questions. Thanks for being patient, Micah. I appreciate it. I would love to hear. Feel free to weigh in on personal experience or what we've been talking about, or a little bit of both.
Yeah, so, my experience is similar to Tawanna's in many ways, but also different in its own ways. I grew up in a conservative Christian home. I still consider myself a strong Christian. That hasn't changed, but certainly what I believe being a Christian to be about, what I think faith is, the role of tolerating uncertainty that I think faith requires. All these things have evolved dramatically since I was about 16 or 17 years old. But when I was, 16, 17, 18, I was very, very active. I was going on mission trips. I knew I wanted to be a pastor. Right. And I would say about that time is when I started to struggle with lingering doubts, not about whether or not I wanted to be a Christian, but about some of the themes that Dr. Witzig hinted at. Hypermorality, have I lost my salvation? Some themes that I've learned in time are pretty common for conservative Christians with scrupulosity. And what I told myself as a teenager was, once I get to Bible college, this will all get sorted out. Once I formally study theology, this will all become clear to me, and I will, with complete and total confidence, pastor a church and give people all the insight that they need with no doubts in my mind. And that was really what I believed was going to happen. And so my real battle in the trenches with scrupulosity began after that first semester of Bible college, where I realized I was completely wrong about the level of certainty that I was going to obtain. And all of a sudden, I just realized, wow, these questions that I cannot shake, there are no clear answers in the way that I want answers. There is no certainty in the way that I want certainty. And at that point, I didn't know how to do the Christian faith anymore. I knew I still wanted to be a Christian. I knew I still loved God, but I had no idea how the world was anything other than just a sick game where we never got answers and we are spinning around the sun at breakneck speed, and who knows how many universes are out there, right? I mean, I was just like, how do people live in this world? And I think I just finally recognized somehow everybody else in my church lives with these things that I can't stand. And eventually got therapy, and ERP was a huge part of it. And learned to say, okay, I can either change the way I think about these things, or I'm going to be miserable because I can't change the inherent uncertainty in religion and theology and the world. So that's a real short version of my journey, how it began and what finally led to some clarity and some freedom.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate that. Tawanna, you already have some thoughts, right?
Well, well, that's why I'm at a crossroads right now. I don't want to use the word confusion because confusion is of the devil, is what my father always told me. So I don't want to say confused, but I am not sure where I'm at religiously right now. Right now, I do meditation. My father tells me that's not Christian to meditate. So it's like, what, where am I? So I'm on a journey right now to try to find that spiritual part of me. Mm-hmm. I just know that once I get back there, if I go back to Christianity, I want it to be different. And I don't want to have to hide who I truly am just to appease other people. And because that was hard enough. And I think that if I'm able to come out and actually speak, other people and sitting in the congregation that feels the same way as me can speak out. So I want to be really ready before I actually embrace that again. But I totally understand where you're coming from. Totally get it.
Mm-hmm. Ted, did you have thoughts? I could see you percolating over there.
Well, one of the things that I would say is that we all come to things with lenses, and just like I have the lenses of my glasses, and most of the time, people with scrupulosity and OCD don't know that they have OCD and scrupulosity as a lens, okay? And the people around them don't realize that they have OCD and scrupulosity as a lens. When you view anything through the lens of OCD and scrupulosity, it's going to alter that. Just like if these lenses were blue, I'd see blue, or if they were green, I'd see green. The reality is, when somebody has scrupulosity and they look at a Bible or a religious text, they are seeing that text through the skew of OCD. Okay, and one of the things that will happen is that OCD will always move toward fear. It will always move towards the what if. It will always move toward the fact that even though there's a 0.0000001% chance that could happen, it'll probably happen to you, and those kind of things. And I think what happens is that we get mixed in the language, because oftentimes when we're talking about matters of faith and doubt, we talk about doubt and uncertainty and OCD. And so when people are talking about doubts or they're talking about thoughts and things like this, we end up talking at cross purposes. And so that ends up creating a lot of problems because so I'm going to give you a definition. When I talk about faith, I talk about that faith is not the absence of feeling uncertain. Okay, faith is moving forward through the uncertainty, and that's really key. Okay, and so I would even say, so if I would put that in a religious context, I would say faith isn't the absence of feeling uncertain; it's trusting God through the uncertainty. Mm-hmm. The reason I say that's so important is OCD is oftentimes a search for a certain feeling state in our chest and abdomen. We're trying to feel something. And you know what? In a lot of religious contexts, to feel peaceful is exactly what we're trying to do: is to feel peaceful, and or like Micah said, to feel saved, or those kind of things. But to understand that OCD, by its nature, if we could actually look at a brain scan and look at what parts are lit up and not, one of the main brain centers that is an error detection circuit but is right there to say, oh no, what if? Oh no, what if? Oh no, what if?
Tawanna or Micah, do you have any thoughts to that?
Treatments is acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. Mm-hmm. And I use that a lot along with exposure and response prevention. And one of the things that I really love about ACT is it tells people we need to identify what our values are and to keep moving towards those. And why I like that so much is that I think that what most of us are trying to do when we're trying to deal with scrupulosity is we're trying to analyze it and to figure it out up here. Okay. And so there's tons of being up in our head. And really, one of the things we want to do is we want to have walking faith. Walking faith is getting out of our head and into our life. Okay. It is moving in the direction of our values, and it is moving in a way that says, yeah, I may have some uncertainty over here, but I'm not going to spend all day trying to resolve uncertainty. And then when I resolve it finally, because it doesn't resolve, we keep on moving forward, and we go towards the things. So taking care of the kids and taking care of our health and all those things that are really important to us. OCD wants you to go, I have to get certainty first,
right?
Then I'm going to move.
I love it. Go ahead, Micah.
I was just going to piggyback on what was said. I think that's been real true to my experience, that for me, scrupulosity created this overwhelming, poignant, and urgent sense of we have to get certainty about existential question A, B, or C right now. And
right now,
we cannot go to school before this is solved. We cannot work a job before this is solved. And there's also this sense of, with my OCD, and I think with other people I've known with other types of OCD, not only the sense of we have to solve this now, but if we do not solve it now, we will never come to terms with this, right? Like the rest of my life is going to be lived out wrestling with this moral uncertainty or this religious question that I can't answer. There is absolutely no room, or certainly wasn't in my scrupulous struggles, for let's put this on the shelf for a little while. Let's do some of these things that I know God has revealed in his word are priorities that I should be attending to. And let's just kind of work this out over time. OCD didn't allow me to do that. It was right now, we must solve this. Otherwise, nothing in life, even that's important, can move on.
And that's so true in any subtype. It's interesting. The existential stuff is way more. It can be very debilitating, because you're talking about not just your life, but afterlives and eternity, and you're using these words that are permanent and forever, and that blows your mind, because there are already so many questions around those. Those are, topics that have been philosophized for hundreds of thousands of years, not 100, but thousands of years. I think that I think a few things was coming up for me when you guys were talking, which is the one interesting thing is I've always felt, well, first of all, I love ACT. ACT is amazing. We've done a bunch of town halls on it. It's a really, really effective it's disposure-based therapy, and it's very effective. It really helped me in the way I relate to my thoughts. What was interesting is sitting here and listening to Tawanna speak, I had this interesting thought that it's interesting how in some ways, and I know Ted's in a little bit of a weird position here because he's on both sides, right? So it's like we're not demonizing in any way religion and spirituality, but at the same time, you have situations where Tawanna, where she's been highly stigmatized, almost to a traumatic fault. But one of the things was interesting as she was talking. I was like, wow, there's a lot of similarities between, extremely conservative, old school religion and OCD. And the first thing that came to mind was the rigidity of it, right? OCD is completely rigid. It does not want us to be flexible. It wants what it wants. And in a way, your church is also rigid. It believes what it believes. Is there room? I was going to ask you, Ted, is there room for flexibility in religion?
Yeah. So a couple things to highlight here, and this is the way that I would look at it. So first of all, the research on OCD and religion shows that in essence, it isn't religion itself that makes people OCD. Okay. And so I think one of the things is now a religious group and what they think about thoughts, what they think about correct behavior and things like that, that can help people develop what we refer to as obsessional beliefs. So things like perfectionism, intolerance for uncertainty, inflated responsibility, overimportance of thoughts. Those kind of things are can be learned in a group. So I think one of the other things is that I would just be careful, just in this, the broad brush is hard, because individually, I mean, I ache for you, Tawanna. I do. And I would say I ache for anybody that's put in a spot where they're kind of put in that spot between either God loves you, because you can get certainty on thoughts, and these things, or or not. I would say it this way, that every religious group out there has some people with OCD, and their OCD will grab around those belief systems. But I would just say this: I would really encourage you to make sure that everybody, that we need good OCD treatment. Yeah. Okay, because being able to try to figure out what you believe when you're looking through Scrupulosity's lens is going to be really, really hard. Here's the other thing, though, that a lot of people fear getting OCD treatment because they fear that OCD treatment will make them less religious.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm going to tell you that I've seen exactly the opposite. I've seen exactly that the more that OCD is put in the back seat, okay, the more somebody's ability to discern and to follow their belief system occurs. Okay. And so I think that a lot of people are fearful in that regard. And I would encourage everybody to say too, that we need to be mindful about the exposures and things, because sometimes, and this is a very unfortunate thing, sometimes people are put in the bind of saying, a well-meaning but misguided professional will say, okay, you need to do this exposure, and that exposure is a violation of their faith. Okay. And so they're put in this bind that says, okay, either you do this exposure and violate your faith, or you don't do this exposure and you stick with your OCD. And what we need to do is have a real collaborative relationship between the client, the therapist, maybe the client's family or pastor, whoever. That collaboration allows effective and respectful exposures. And that, well, I should stop there because I could keep going on that.
No, I appreciate it, Ted. I think that at the end of the day, and what you were hinting at, and again, it's true across all subtypes and symptoms of OCD, is the ability to put OCD in the back burner, the ability to follow your values will make you better at what you care about. And so the reality of good treatment and good therapy and effective, all of that, is if you want to be devout to your religion, and we happen to have a Christocentric conversation here, but OCD and religious scrupulosity is across all religions, Hindu, Judaism, Islam, whatever it is, right? So, but the reality of it is when you put OCD in the back seat, you can be the best version of yourself. So whatever version that is, whoever is Micah and Tawanna and Ethan, without OCD clouding it, then if we want to go back, then Tawanna, it's a you choice. It's not an OCD choice. And when it becomes a you choice, then you can decide, what do I want? How do I want to explore it? And how can I be the best at doing that? And so if you choose faith, if you choose religion, if you choose spirituality, however that manifests, it'll be beautiful because it's coming from you and not the OCD, and you'll be able to embrace it and engage it in a way that's truly meaningful for you.
Right. And see, my main thing with me not claiming it now anymore has to do a lot with the people that is in it, because I feel I believe that if I had support when I started talking about it, when I started looking for help or support from them just in general, if I had that support, then it wouldn't be so much pain for me. Yeah. That's why I'm like, I distance myself from it. Yeah. And I'm at a crossroads now trying to figure it out. Now, I still go to church to support my father because he does preach, and I do go. But as far as being a part of the congregation and being entwined with them, I don't do that because I don't I just feel that they're claiming something in my mind. Jesus was lover of all people. And for them to claim his name and his values and to do what they did to me, that was not love for me. And so I have to take a look back and look at what's going on before I can honestly say that I'm a Christian, because that's not what I got.
For sure. Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, I was just going to try to make a couple comments here and tie a few things together. I definitely, I mean, I'm still a Christian myself, but I can definitely say that I too dealt with a lot of mental health stigma from Christians who just had opinions on mental health that were not terribly informed. And it does do some damage, because I think a person, you know, they really have to decide, you know, how do I separate who Jesus is or what my faith is from, you know, maybe some of the people that are a part of this religious context, but are spreading some ideas or some stigmas, you know, that make things difficult. And I think it gets into what Ted was saying about, you don't want therapy to violate your faith. And some pastors you might talk to might tell you that psychiatry is not the way to go. But then when you don't get help, you're kind of like, well, this isn't working. And so there's just so much tension morally and religiously facing the scrupulous patient. And I think one thing that, like what Ted was saying, it would work so well and be so much better for scrupulous patients if clergy and psychiatrists and family could work together in an interdisciplinary way and not see their roles so much as competing. And what I want to say on this topic that took me a long time to get to and a lot of struggle, I think a lot of pastors, they want to go to, you know, religious texts about anxiety, and they want to lay down a principle, and they want to say, this is how it is. As opposed to, you know, stepping back a little bit and saying, wait a minute, you know, when something like scripture was written, it was written with certain assumptions being made, right? I mean, it's assumed that scripture is written to people who can read, or that someone who can read the text to listeners. You know, some of these texts are originally written in certain languages that need to be translated. And I've learned in my own battle with mental illness that scripture is not written assuming that you're severely anxious and OCD or whatever. And getting some exposure therapy to help neutralize the influence of OCD helps me look at scripture with the mind that Paul probably had in mind when he wrote it. Like, he wasn't writing to that OCD person. Right. He was writing to someone he felt was more like him. And I had to realize, you know what? I need personally, and I can't recommend anything for anyone else because it's not my place or profession, but my own experience was that without medication and ERP, my mind couldn't be in the place that some of the authors of scripture were writing to. And that was a long journey for me.
Yeah. Thanks, Micah. I think it's well said. And I think that oftentimes one of the models that we think about, but sometimes forget, is that it's called the biopsychosocial spiritual model. We have a physical body. Okay, we've got hormones and neurons and chemicals and a good night's sleep or not, and all those, and medications or not. We have our thoughts and emotions, the psychological part. We have the social context we're in, and then the spiritual aspect of our lives. And the fact is, the way that I love the concept that you're talking about, the collaboration across groups.
Sure.
Okay. This is really important. And I would say that this is one of the things that I talk a lot to people about, is that OCD and scrupulosity affects all four areas: biopsychosocial, spiritual. And it affects it in different ways for different angles. But we want to make treatment work well, biopsychosocial, spiritual. Okay. And so what we're doing is, sometimes we're using a medication to help with the OCD. And oftentimes I get the question, well, is that, if I take a medication, am I trusting the medication, over trusting God. And I would say, no. The fact is, I mean, for my frame, God is all wise and all powerful, and serotonin reuptake inhibitors don't all of a sudden neutralize him. SSRIs are not like kryptonite to God. He knows how we're built. And ERP works there, and having on the social end, having people in our corner that can learn with us. And I just wanted to say, because a lot of our discussion tonight has been around people's experience inside of Christian churches, one of the things is if you have a pastor that doesn't understand OCD and things of that nature, I have things on my website for. And it's scrupulosity.org is you can look that up. There's a bunch of free things, and some of them is for pastors on how to understand OCD and scrupulosity. It's for family members. It's to understand the difference between, like what you said, Micah. The fact is that when people read scripture, if they read a thing like a verse that says, like, take every thought captive, for example, sure, and then you apply that through the lens of OCD, we know very, very well that if you try to do thought suppression with OCD, you're going to get a rebound, and you're going to get a bad one. And then the more anxious you are about it, the worse it's going to get. And so we have to understand what to do with that, and we can do things with that, but it needs to be understood in the context that is fruitful for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So thank you all very much. There's a lot of conversation going on in the comment threads. I want to encourage people to ask questions as well. I'll try to dive into some of the conversation or some of the statements as well as questions. But if you have specific questions, I always like to look for those first. One thing I want to say before we dive into questions is that this overall idea of accepting everyone right now, wherever you are in your journey, it's valid, and we definitely accept that and should accept that. And I'm speaking to Tawanna and Micah as well as everyone here in that sense that I think it's okay to be in limbo and question and be searching for answers. Dealing with OCD and these type of things are again about being flexible and changing all of these behaviors and routines and enablings and reassurances that you've been doing for decades, and to have to like unwire that. Sometimes back is the way to forward. And that's why I don't even like to call it a step back. It's not a step back because you're moving forward even by stepping back, not to get existential. But so the bottom line is, the reality of it is whatever people are feeling, whatever they're thinking, wherever they are in their lives during this, it is valid, and we accept it, and we offer you grace and compassion with that as you seek to sort everything out. I believe, and I was just reminded of this, that faith and mental health aren't mutually exclusive.
For sure.
And I think that's absolutely, and I think that's an important, and I think wherever your belief is in the moment. Tawanna, and I think Micah, and anybody with lived experience, I don't usually talk this much, so I apologize, but anybody with lived experience can relate to is, the more heavily we're stigmatized by people, we have, we are so deeply hurt, if not tormented, if not traumatized, and we have to work through those things in addition to the OCD and anxiety, and those are all journeys, and so it's a process. There's no time limit to the process. It's steps. And so we're doing the best we can. So I just want to say that, I appreciate where everyone is in this moment, including me and Tawanna and Micah and Ted and everybody watching. It's valid. The feelings, the emotions, the thoughts, they're all valid. And all we want to do is have a conversation around how can we move forward in a way that's value driven. And so we can be the best versions of ourselves, acknowledge the OCD as a disorder, not a decision, and move forward accordingly. So that's my...
I want to add one thing. Ethan, before this started, you said that I'm fierce because of my bio. The reason why I do so much stuff and continue to do so much stuff is not fierce. It's more so anger. And I said this in another town hall. Everything that I do is out of anger because of the way that I was treated. And I don't want anybody else to go through what I went through.
Oh, sure.
I'm gonna reframe a touch, Tawanna, if you don't mind, because I'm fierce too. But my reframe quickly is that I was definitely in the beginning of my advocacy pissed, very very angry for the years that I lost, and my early talks early on were very heated,
Right.
and it does turn into a place. But I will argue that I do know, and I won't mention names, but I do know lots of advocates that are angry, but they advocate in a way that is not positive and not healthy.
Okay.
And that's why I call you fierce. You may be angry, but you may, and so am I at times, and so is Micah, and so are so many people that have lost friends and time and experiences. I lost so much in the first 30 years of my life, but I will say that the way you channel your advocacy and the individual that Tawanna is fierce, and what you bring and the productivity and the positive nature and the way that you advocate, that's what's fierce.
Okay.
Sorry, I just want to chime in real fast in bouncing off what you said there, Ethan. Just that, just to be clear, like, I'm a Christian, but I wouldn't want anybody on the live feed to feel like if you're Hindu or Buddhist or Muslim, that there isn't hope for scrupulosity. I mean, for me, it ended up being in an evangelical Christian context. But Dr. Reed Wilson talks about how, whatever the subject matter of OCD, the underlying issue, as he would say, is learning to deal with uncertainty better. And so I wouldn't want anyone to feel like if the conversation is primarily about Christianity, that if they have questions from their particular faith background, that ERP and things like that wouldn't have relevance to them. Because like I said, from my own lived experience, not a professional perspective or anything, but from my lived experience, I really think that it would.
And some of the other, and I've learned this, I'm speaking from my girlfriend who left some good comments in, who's minister, but I've learned from her that, the stigma in other faiths like Hinduism and Islam around mental health is terrible, absolutely terrible. And so, those are definite conversations, and I think even diving further, perhaps the town hall, say it out loud, around, obviously other diverse religions and houses of worship, along with religious scrupulosity. Anyway, I apologize for those. I want to go ahead and get into some questions for sure. Marisol at 7:05 p.m. says, and I know Ted touched on this a little bit, with religious scrupulosity, Fran, it's at 7:05 p.m. With religious scrupulosity, do you go about doing ERP? I know you touched on this, Ted, but let's weigh in a little bit, both from a clinical standpoint and a experiential standpoint.
Yes. So a couple things that I would say. Yes, I do ERP with my clients, and I do a lot of imaginal exposures. Okay, imaginal exposures involve writing out a script of the feared content. So a couple things that I want to say. I would start by saying that our goal is for you to be able to do and to live out the practices and beliefs of the faith that you subscribe to. Okay. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out. So for example, if that's to go to church on Sunday, to be able to go to church, to be able to participate in different things. And so what happens is sometimes in ERP, professionals do something called overcorrection. And so what they'll do is they'll do an extreme exposure, because they figure if you can do an extreme exposure, then what you actually have to do is less significant than that. So if you can do this, you can for sure do this. Unfortunately, sometimes those overcorrection goes well beyond what a person is comfortable with. And so I want to highlight the fact that we need to do exposures that expose you to the uncertainty. Okay, this is key. What happens is sometimes fear that they're asked to do things that are wrong and in violation. If it's an actual violation, like for example, people that have intrusive sexual thoughts, it's not uncommon to do a kind of exposure where it's uncommon for me. I don't do this kind of exposure, but some professionals will have people do exposures to pornography. I don't have my clients do exposures to pornography. Okay. Some do. Okay. I don't, because for my clientele and for me, that just doesn't, that doesn't fit. Okay. And so I have to then come up with a way to be able to help that person do an exposure that allows them to feel the uncertainty, move through that, but that doesn't violate their faith. And so, is OCD going to scream about doing exposure? Absolutely. OCD does not like it to be challenged at all, and so OCD is not going to be happy about this. But the flip side is, we can figure out ways. And you working with a therapist who hears your story, who knows you, that you can develop a therapeutic trust with, you can do this. And it takes work, it takes effort, but it's also very individualized.
Tawanna and Micah, I'll turn to Micah first. Actually, Micah, what was your ERP experience like in terms of your own religious group?
Yeah, so for me, ERP was crucial. In my particular experience, much of what Dr. Witzig mentioned, I did a lot of imaginal exposures. A lot of these things you're dealing with, religious, theological, existential worries about heaven and hell, about is God mad at me, about all these different things. And it's very different than some of the other exposures that, I've done for other segments of my OCD where, go out and do this and rate your anxiety. So, yeah, the imaginal exposures were huge. And I want to make a couple comments because I think that, again, I'm not a therapist or a professional, but from a lived experience perspective, there's a couple things going on that were going on for me engaging with ERP. Number one, I had this very deep fear of searing my conscience. My sense was what we are doing is we are exposing me to things that my conscience is, activated by, and then we're teaching me not to react. And that terrified me. I was very scared of that. Until I spent some time recognizing, in part through a study of Scripture, that, Scripture doesn't just warn about a seared conscience. It also warns about an overactive conscience. Mm-hmm. And I had to understand that there was actually benefit to my spiritual growth in not having a conscience that was firing on every little thing. And I had to really do some reflection about, maybe it's possible that my OCD is telling me guilt is wonderful, shame is wonderful. You can never go too far on the guilt side. But I was totally missing this piece of, there is also damage in walking around feeling bad about every little thing, never being able to connect with God in a genuine way because I'm always thinking I'm, stepping in the wrong place. And I think in addition to that, I had to recognize that, like what Dr. Witzig was mentioning, the therapists that were encouraging me to do this, I respected their faith. I trusted them as people. This was not day one, I walk in, meet a guy I don't know, and we start tackling my deepest existential fears. This was a process of over time recognizing this person understands my faith well enough that they respect it. I trust them. And, other people in my faith community that are living the kind of life I think I want to live, they're not doing what I'm doing. They're not worrying sick over and over about this. So spiritual growth must involve that component. So that was big for me. And then I think secondly, and I want to be careful saying this because it probably isn't for everyone, but for me personally, I got so miserable that I eventually just decided to put a little blind trust into some people that I thought was worth it. Because quite frankly, ERP doesn't make sense, and it didn't make sense to me in the depths of scrupulosity, because when I first came to treatment, my mindset was, we're going to answer these questions that plague me. We're going to get to the bottom of these things. And when I was told by my therapist, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to accept that there is no bottom, and we're going to learn to live with these things. So I had to put a little blind trust forward. I was terrified of ERP, but it caused so much growth. And yet at one phase of it, I was very nervous about it and did not understand how imagining all these horrible things and then giving a number of my anxiety was going to get me anywhere. But it absolutely did.
Go ahead, Ted.
Thank you. I think one of the things about that is, you know, how you talked about it, you had to put blind faith or blind trust in it. With my clients, I tell them that exposure and response prevention is a therapy of faith. Okay. We are stepping into that, and ACT is a therapy of faith. We're living into that. And what we are doing is we're learning to tolerate the uncertainty and the angst today so we can live into our values and in the present moment and in tomorrow. And I think that the questions around how to do exposure are there's all different kinds of texts out there. And I think really, though, it is that thing that you said, Micah, that you developed trust with your practitioner. And again, trust versus I feel certain about everything. No. You know what? My clients might trust me a lot, but at the end of the day, when we start pushing on those OCD buttons, they're going to get anxious. But we're doing this for a reason. I have an article on my website called Effective and Religiously Sensitive Exposures for Scrupulosity that you can look at. And then also it's also something you can share with a therapist if you're afraid that the therapist doesn't understand.
Thank you, Ted. Yeah, well, we'll send, if you actually want to put the link in the private chat.
Okay.
We can add the link to the to the comment thread. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, Micah, for the insight as well. Really appreciate that. For sure. Let me fortunately the comments shift and I lose my place, and it happens every time. It's really annoying. There was a question that I had marked. Apologies. Here we go. Because this speaks specifically to Tawanna's experience. I think I'll let Ted touch on it quickly from a clinical standpoint, but then to Melina, I think you relate. Hi, Melina. And I think you relate. So Melina wrote, "Hi all, at 7:13 p.m. Fran. Hi all. Is it normal to burn out on your faith once you recover from religious scrupulosity? I am still a Christian. My passion just seems to have gone out the door with my compulsions." Do you want to, from a clinical standpoint, Ted, do you see a lot of that?
Yeah, so I would say that one of the things that happens is people have poured their heart and soul into trying to make faith with OCD work. Okay. And it is excruciating. It is tiring and exhausting. And I want to say that it is one of the ways that, from my perspective, you can look at this and say, is this a healthy faith or not? Because is this producing the kind of fruit that we want out of a religious faith, which is things like joy and purpose and meaning, versus exasperation, depression, and a sense of feeling trapped. I will say that then one of the things that a lot of people have had to do as they kind of get to a place where they've worked through some of their OCD, they have to really work on what their picture of God is. In my concept, I refer to that as their God image, their picture of who it is that they're worshiping or relating to. And I will just tell you that two of the major things that shift that, anxiety disorders and trauma shift the God image. It twists that around. And so we really have to really work with coming to a sense of who it is that I'm that it is that I'm following and I'm worshiping. And I will tell you, there's many times that I ask people about, so what is this? Who are you? Tell me about how you relate to God and how you think God is, and those kind of things. And what's interesting is sometimes they're like, I just can't get close to this God, and the picture that they tell me about is some hideous beast, that some combination that OCD, depression, and pain and trauma have created. And holy schmoly, that is, I can't get close to that either. And that's where for me, it does take some time to kind of really work on healing of the God image and really kind of coming to the basics. And I will tell you from my frame now, is one of the best ways to do that is look at it through the eyes of a child. Mm-hmm. Okay. And just to be able to have a very simple faith, a very simple trusting faith, keep it basic, and just grow from there. And that's all.
Tawanna, I know you have thoughts. I can see your brain moving. Go ahead.
Well, as far as being burnt out on religion, I don't think getting well makes you burnt out. I think it's the people, like my experience, because I deal with OCD and trauma, so I got both of them. So it makes mine a double whammy. And I really don't want to speak too much on religion, only because I don't really practice it all like that anymore. But my thing is, you need to know who you are, and then you can find your own path to follow. It could be Christian, it could be Islam, it could be Hindu, it could be Buddhism. What you need to find your own path, which makes you find the joy, find the love, find the peace that you need. It doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional religion. As for me, Baptist religion hurt me desperately. I mean, I still feel the scars, trust me. And part of my ERP was with my therapist was to actually go back to that church and be okay with how I already know those people see me. They see me as a sinner, so I go there to support my father, but I also go there as part of my therapy. I also have 3 Bibles that stay by my bed, and my ERP is not to go into them and start reading the scriptures and praying the prayers, just have them sit there. So, I mean, for me to really speak on, does religion burn you out? I don't think that I'm the person to say that, only because of the experience I had within the religious community that I come from.
Thank you, Tawanna. I think there's a variety. The reality is there's a variety of experiences. And although religious scrupulosity is a thing that joins the struggle, all the journeys are completely unique. Tawanna, as she's speaking, she's talking a lot to the individuals and not necessarily so much, the religion itself. I think in many cases, though, people that maybe aren't raised, with a father who is a clergy or something like that may have a completely different experience. And Melina, I look at a few buzzwords in your question. You use the word burnout, you use the word recover, and you use the word compulsions. And, Tawanna has very specific reasons, and so does Micah, frankly, for where there are in their religious and spiritual and faithful journeys. But my question for you, Melina, is when you say burnout, we definitely get burnout from compulsions. And when we don't want to do compulsions, we avoid. Right? Especially so avoidance behaviors are very common. I'm not going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to poop in a corner because I don't want to spend 14 hours cleaning it. Right? So my question then becomes, are there avoidances around the religious or faith because you don't want to get wrapped up in compulsions again? So have you pushed religion and faith aside out of fear? You said, I'm not sure where you are in your journey, honestly, and if you're still compulsing or you're in a state of maintenance now, but there could definitely be a fear of like, I don't want that life again. And there's an enmeshment or a melding between the OCD and the religion, right? Where they're just one and the same. And it's like, well, if I have that life, then there's both, as we talked about. And really, faith and OCD can be completely different. So I would perhaps explore, with a professional or provider and even some self-processing, what does burnout mean for you? And where are you? Where is your faith regardless? And is it tied into your fear of OCD coming back and getting back into that feedback loop and that spiral again? But thank you, Tawanna. I appreciate that. This isn't religious scrupulosity specific, but we'll definitely answer it. Lily asks at 7:18 p.m. This is a long question, Fran. I'll just ask it. Any tips on how to do exposures for obsessions that don't necessarily cause anxiety anymore? For example, dealing with unwanted sexual feelings. When trying to do ERP, I can't really rate my anxiety or wait for it to go down because it's not really there. I constantly have to deal with these feelings all the time, and has led to many compulsions, like not being able to hug family members, pet dog, watch TV that has images of kids. I feel really stuck, and I'm not sure how to go, and it goes on. I guess we'll lead with our Dr. Ted. Any thoughts regarding obsessions and compulsions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things there's a variety of reasons, and I don't know which will fit this particular case, but sometimes when we're doing exposures and things like that, the SUDs, or the subjective units of distress, don't move very much, or whatever. What's very interesting is newer models of exposure are showing that what's most important is not whether the SUDs just keep going down, but it's whether people can learn to tolerate their uncertainty, and then here's the key: tolerate and then move on. To move on towards the things that they care about. Okay, I can't express to you how important this is. OCD by its nature makes us look, particularly scrupulosity, we're constantly going, oh no, did I just do that? Did I do this wrong? We're looking over our shoulder all the time. We're always looking over our shoulder. If you're riding a bike, you have to look forward and you have to pedal, okay? If you're not pedaling and if you're not looking forward, you're either not moving or you're going to run into something. Right. And so this is so important, because oftentimes what we're trying to do is we're trying to go, okay, I'm going to use my treatment until I am so sure that these thoughts and feelings are gone, then I'll move forward, because I got to get rid of them entirely, 100%. In actuality, what we need to do is we need to, do your exposures and do them as faithfully as you can. But the exposure is also about moving through the uncertainty. It's not waiting around till everything is resolved. Okay.
Yeah, Micah, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just so important with scrupulosity. For me, it was anyway. As it has been in other areas of my OCD, to keep exposures going, and keep looking at scrupulosity as something that I'm growing beyond, I'm working on, I'm managing, I'm keeping in check. I wanted to kind of piggyback a little bit on one of the last comments, just to divert real fast and then come right back. But talking about burnout, or I think it's so, at least part of my journey with scrupulosity is that it's not just that the compulsions are exhausting, but the stress that being scrupulous can place on relationships is exhausting, and so maybe you've had a couple of, disheartening conversations with a pastor or an elder where they didn't understand your mental illness, or maybe someone in the congregation or several people, said something really insensitive about mental illness. And pretty soon you start to associate church with not only something that triggers me, but people that don't understand me, relationships that need repairing because of how my mental illness has affected them. And I think sometimes there is just this general sense of burnout because just the whole faith community has been difficult to relate to because of scrupulosity. So I think it's important when you're coming back from, trying to get scrupulosity under control, to keep doing exposures, keep trying to manage things, and also recognize that sometimes it's those relationships that have grown distant that make faith feel harder and make it feel more exhausting. And that's a process that I've been through personally. And honestly, it's people, sometimes are really slow to let their stigmas go. And sometimes I think, at least for me as a Christian, sometimes I just have to say, some of the things people have said to me about my mental illness, like, Jesus doesn't say those same critical things. And sometimes that, I think, has to be enough for a Christian to say that, maybe some of these Christians around me aren't going to understand. And sometimes there has to be a certain level of being okay with that and moving forward and choosing to forgive and work through those issues.
Thank you, Micah. I appreciate it. One thing I want to add back to Lily's question also is I always like to look at the details of the question, and I'm going to tee off one of the points that Ted made because I think it's a good point. Is that you say in your question constantly dealing with, and you say it actually twice that you constantly have to deal. So one of the things about this, Lily, is even though whether the anxiety is there or not, to Ted's point, I'm just going to really elaborate on the point that he made is, are you willing for the thoughts to be there, regardless of whether the anxiety is not? Because one of the things I'm gauging from the question is, I don't want the thoughts anymore. I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to have to go through this. I don't want to compulse. I don't want it. And of course, we don't want the thoughts. And that's the eventual goal, right, is to not experience the constant bombardment of thoughts and the feelings. But in the moment right now, regardless of whether anxiety is present, the question is, do you have to deal with the thoughts? Can you let the thoughts happen and not engage with them, not deal with them, not get wrapped into the thought argument and move in and then it's in accordance with your values and being okay, not being okay with the feelings as well, and experiencing those feelings and resisting the compulsions, right? And living certainty. So just really extrapolating on what Ted said, it's this concept and this idea of maybe I have to deal with these thoughts for a while. And maybe I have to deal with the anxiety and the gross feelings that come from these thoughts. But, and I talk about this all time, is so much so we let our feelings dictate our actions. If we don't feel good, we don't do it. And we don't want our feelings. Feelings are valid. It's okay to have the feelings. But in many cases, if the feelings dictate maladaptive actions, we don't want to, it doesn't matter. And we don't want to do treatment to feel better. In other words, in your mind, you're not doing ERP today to feel better tonight, right? It's a long process. Right. And so you can't make ERP a feel good. If you feel better, one of those things that's like, oh, if I just go, I'll feel better. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. But the reality is if you follow the values during the day, you go to bed that night reinforcing really good things in your head, even if it's not conscious. And so I would let go of the belief that I'm supposed to feel better now because I'm doing these things. The feeling better is down the road. You're doing these things. You're investing in your I always say you're investing the pain now for the pleasure of the rest of your life. And so, Lily, I would suggest to you to see if you can work on not engaging with those thoughts, not dealing with them at all, just letting them chatter and be like, hi, see you, hear you, I got you, thank you. Very interesting what you're saying. I'm going to go do now X. And you don't have to feel good doing it. You can feel miserable doing it, but at least you did it. I also want to encourage everyone, including Tawanna, Micah, and Ted, to read a lot of the comments. There's some really, really wonderful, honest, sincere, candid, raw comments here. Lots of love for Micah and Tawanna, for sure. So please, please, please take a look back. I'm just reading through. I want to get to questions, although thank you for being advocates and weighing in and talking about your personal experiences. Looking for, let's see, where is, I apologize. I'm scrolling down. Here it is. So Ashley wrote, there's a quick question at the end that I caught. Hi, Ashley. I hope you're well, by the way. Good to see you. So the only way I'm able, you don't need to post this. It's long. I'll just read it slowly. The only way I'm able to separate my OCD thoughts from my normal thoughts is if I label them as not part of me. It has become a compulsion to identify and label thoughts all day long. I usually tell myself I have to abort mission because OCD takes hold and won't unstick. But I struggle with the values piece. And then she wrote how to redirect. I'll throw it out to the three of you. Comments, questions, experiences with sort of trying to identify you from your OCD and making that separation?
Well, for me, I'm going through that right now, actually, because in the beginning, when I first met my psychiatrist and therapist, I was put on Zoloft and I begged them to take me off. So I've been off Zoloft for 2 months. So all my symptoms are coming back with a vengeance, and I've been having a bad couple of weeks. And the only thing that I can say from my point of view is I write everything down. And that's part of my therapy is I write everything down that's bothersome or whatever. I write it down, and my therapist says, after you write it down, read it to yourself. And it'll let you know what thoughts are really yours and what thoughts are just thoughts. And that's the my advice I could give to that. It's very hard to go all day and do that. But see, I meditate. Meditation for me is a good thing too. I meditate, and with COVID, it makes it easy because we're in the house all day long. I can meditate whenever. But meditation is good, and listening to good music, not bad music, but good music. And I don't want to just say classical, because country music is good too. But any type of music that settles your mind and your spirit, listen to it. Meditate and write, journal. That's my advice on that.
I love that you just rebranded COVID. COVID, great for meditation. That's fantastic. I'm going to throw it out to Ted and Micah just for a second. But Ashley, I have a real quick thing that I did for me that my therapist drilled into me, and I just embraced it, and it took a lot of the guesswork out of it, which was, especially when you're in treatment or in the midst of OCD or really struggling, which is, if it smells like OCD, if it tastes like OCD, if it feels like OCD, let's just assume it's OCD. I assumed everything was OCD when I was struggling, when I was in treatment, when I was in therapy. I too got caught up in, but is this me? Is this not me? I just exposed and responded to everything I did until I got to a place where it was just like I just didn't care anymore. And it really took a lot of the guesswork out for me. I don't know, Ted, if you have thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good thing to remember, that a lot of times people get caught up in trying to figure out for sure, where is this thought coming from? Particularly with scrupulosity, one of the things you find is this a temptation? Is this Satan? Is this my flesh? Is this a thought? Is this a this? That discussion is that search, very common but not fruitful. Okay, and so I use a technique a lot. It's called the 2-screen method, and it's kind of like it's an ACT method, and the front screen is like the life that you want to live. That's the life that we're going this way. And there's a side screen over here, and the side screen, things pop up over here, and it might be you're going to fail, or oh no, what if you just prayed to Satan instead of God, or whatever these things are over here. What OCD and what the side screen wants to do is it wants to get your attention off of the life that you want to live, your front screen. And it wants you to get caught up in fighting with the side screen. And here's the catch. The side screen is the energy source for the side screen is fighting and attention and trying to analyze. Okay? So the more you fight and give it attention and analyze, guess what happens? The bigger it gets. What we're trying to do is we're really trying to starve OCD. And so instead of going, okay, is this my flesh? Is this a temptation? We go, you know what? I'm going this way. Trying to figure this out does not actually benefit any of it. Okay? And I know for a lot of people, their OCD will then catch them on the backside, like, oh, you don't care if it's a this, or you don't care if it's a that. And here's the thing. That is a very sneaky thing there. But I will tell you this, that to think about the things that are true and honest and pure and lovely, the things that are out the front screen, it is being with your kids and your loved ones. It's being in nature. It's your relationship with God. It's doing your work. It's those kind of things. It's in the here and now that actually moves your life forward. That's exactly where we need to be. Trying to parse apart, was this a this or a this or that? It does not do any help for us.
Yeah. Also because, OCD thoughts are not unique to people with OCD. Thoughts are thoughts. We're all having the same thoughts. Yeah. OCD thoughts are not unique or special to OCD. And so trying to determine, I do want to add a caveat to what I said, which was if I started to question whether it was OCD, then I not every single thing I treated like OCD. But if I started to go, wait, is this OCD? I'm nervous. Then I knew that it was creeping in and it was manipulative and all that stuff. But thank you, Ted. I actually really like that. I like that ACT precept a lot with the front screen and the side screen. Mm-hmm. Quickly, we have time for a few more. Elizabeth wrote, I'm a therapist with a client who has religious scrupulosity and has become an atheist in response, yet still the obsessions chase her. I feel that the atheism may be a compulsion to address the obsessions. Has anyone heard of something like this? It sounds like an avoidance behavior just off the bat, but go ahead. You guys want to weigh in? Micah, maybe? Or go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, I will say I have seen numbers of people, and I met numbers of people at the OCD Foundation conference, that their way to deal with the fact that the scrupulosity and their pain about trying to deal with it led them to move away from their faith. And I think that I can understand it from that perspective, because it is so painful, and what they were doing is very, very painful. I do think that one of the things is that OCD doesn't just go away because of avoidance, and that's the problem, right? If it's like this, if obsessing, if you just had to obsess for 10 hours and it would go away and it never come back, I'd go, hey, let's start the clock. Let's obsess. Let's get that 10 hours done and we'll be out of the way. If avoidance worked, I'd say just avoid. But in either of those cases, obsessing and avoidance doesn't actually get us to the place that we want to go. I do understand that people sometimes need to revisit and come to a new understanding of their faith, just because it's been so hard, and they thought, like Micah, you talked about, that it was that if I study this enough, I'm going to have absolute certainty, and I think that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we still have to come to that place where we're comfortable enough with what we know and what we don't.
Absolutely. Micah, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's a lot of pain that goes with having scrupulosity and OCD. And I think it, for me, I didn't respond by going into atheism, but I would be lying if I said I didn't have some real questions that I mulled over, about suffering, about, I was going to be a pastor. I was going to go into ministry. And then all of a sudden, here's this mental illness. And, I'm in a partial hospitalization program, nowhere near serving in ministry. And why would God allow that to happen to me?
Sure.
And I think a lot of people struggling with mental illness who are particularly religious, they are trying to find some way to respond to these questions, these just perplexing issues of, this is not entirely what I thought being a Christian was going to be all about. Like, these are not exactly the plans I had for my life. And, I sit here at 30 years old, not in ministry, not married. I mean, if you would have told me at 18, this is what my 30-year-old life would look like, I would have been quite overwhelmed. And I think it took me a process of having to adapt to that and having to accept that, in the same way that there is uncertainty related to, religion and philosophy and theology that I can't, spend my whole life chewing apart. There are mysteries in my faith, such as why has my life played out the way it has, that I also have to just have some acceptance about. And that's hard. I think for me as an OCD person, I'm wired even philosophically to want answers about my own life so I can understand how even OCD fits in this puzzle that is my existence. And therapy has really helped me personally to understand, some of these answers that your OCD, is just so convinced you need. You have to have these answers to live your life. You're going to have to learn that that's not entirely true. And that's been, my situation for sure.
I just want to say just how thankful I am, Micah, for what you've shared, and Tawanna for what you've shared tonight. This is I think one of the things we have to remember is that OCD, mental illness in general, just wants us to just feel like, what, hey, I had these experiences, I'm washed up, my life is over, there's going to be anything, and you both have really in different ways and different paths, but you're really looking at it and said, hey, you know what, I've had this path of suffering and it's been hard, and you're both on a thing on a town hall tonight, being able to share that you're really seeking to overcome and understand it and to help others, and I think that's really, really powerful. OCD will always want you to say you are you are out for the count. There isn't anything that's good that's going to come out of you. Yeah, it's painful. I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture about all the different pieces, but I just want to say that you are you're the fact that you're working hard to be a blessing to others is notable.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I do too.
They appreciate it too, Ted. They're just,
yeah.
No.
Although I don't look at it as that. Like I said, I'm very peeved over how I was treated.
Sure, I understand.
Because I'm not going to mention. Yeah. I'm not going to mention any names on here or any organizations that I have in my podcast of people who and organizations who do not live up to what they're supposed to, and it's because of the racial thing. And I just want everybody to be treated equally, because everybody needs a chance to be mentally healthy.
Yeah,
beautiful. Mm-hmm. No question. I know we're running out of time. There's a statement I want to read, and then I want to read one more quick question, if you guys don't mind, because I think it's a good one. So quickly, Katie wrote, and this is for you, Tawanna. She wrote, "I'm so sorry your battle with OCD was not affirmed by your father's church. I am an ordained minister, school chaplain with OCD, as well as a huge critic of the way religious organizations respond to mental illness. At one point, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to pursue ordination and tried to hide my mental illness because of people like you and Micah. Well, you and Micah. I learned there's a space for evidence-based treatment alongside faith as we seek to be the healthy, talented, compassionate people God, I think, intended." It cuts it off, but I just wanted to read that to you. I like that comment. Mm-hmm. There was one other question I just saw that was, I thought, a really great question, and hopefully I can find it here. Here it is. Actually, let's throw this up on the screen, Fran. At 7:48 p.m., Taylor wrote, "What is the best way to explain scrupulosity to a pastor that you want to involve in OCD treatment?" I think that's a fantastic question.
Me too, and I would like to know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Ted.
Go ahead, Micah, if you want to say something, or Tawanna. I'm glad to answer from my perspective, but I'd be glad.
I can throw in a quick perspective from experience. I have had many conversations with pastors and friends from Bible college about OCD, and honestly, I think the best thing I can say is help them understand that they have a spiritual perspective, that a psychologist has more of a psychological perspective, and that ERP and the spirituality, that they can work in tandem. I think a lot of people in clergy kind of sometimes, not all, but they can tend to think that you're either going the secular route, and that might be dangerous, or you're trusting God and we're getting solutions to the spiritual roots of this problem. Mm-hmm. And helping them understand that we need teamwork on this, that my problem probably has a little bit of both involved, but particularly OCD is largely more psychological than spiritual, and helping them open to that kind of thinking, I think, at least in my experience, is a good place to start.
Thank you, Micah. I think one of the things is that it is true that some people we talk to aren't going to understand, and that's really hard, and that makes me really sad, and it makes you really sad. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I found in this is that mental health professionals are generally afraid of clergy, and clergy are generally afraid of mental health professionals. Okay, and so really the vast majority of both really care for people, and they want people to be well. They go about it very differently. I would really say how important it is to if you're going to be talking to a pastor, the fact is that of being able to look at it through that biopsychosocial spiritual lens, okay? And that's a really, really important thing, because oftentimes what happens is people put an or in between here. It's biological or it's spiritual, or it's biological or psychological or social. and it's and. Okay. And so one of the things that I don't want to do is I don't want to make a family member or a pastor or a doctor or the client, okay, feel like I'm making them make a choice in their life between, are you a spiritual person or a physical person? Okay. Do you have emotions and feelings, or are you social? That's not the wrong. That's the wrong way to look at it. We're a combined whole. We can't, at one level, we can't pull that apart. But one of the things that's so helpful about that is that when we can start that discussion, we can actually help the person, help even the clergy to understand how their role can be very helpful. So, for example, I mean, the fact is, if somebody is doing repetitive confessions and going over and over and over and confessing again and again and again and again, helping the pastor to understand what their role in being able to help that cycle to get stopped, I mean, it can be really, really helpful. And to say, Pastor, this is where I really need your help on this. We need to stop this repetitive confession cycle because it's not healthy spiritually, nor is it healthy psychologically, and we can work in this. But I do think that it's a challenging topic. And I would say that there's one article that I've given to a lot of pastors and that I wrote for people in churches, and it's called Understanding the Overactive Conscience. Okay, and it's to try to help pastors to understand a little bit about scrupulosity.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate it. Yeah. So we're actually, unfortunately, out of time. Any final last words, Tawanna or Micah?
Well, my only thing is for everybody to take care of themselves. I'm a prime advocate for self-care. Either way you get in, you don't have to go to $1 million spa. You could do it at home, because I get that a lot. Well, I don't have the money to go. You could do it at home, get a book and get in the tub. That's self-care. Just take care of yourself, because you cannot function 100% if you're not mentally healthy. And taking care of yourself, even if it's one day out of a week, 1 hour out of a day, just take care of yourself.
Thank you, Tawanna. Micah, go ahead.
I would just say to everybody watching, I know from personal experience that scrupulosity is just really, really miserable at its worst. Mm-hmm. Just keep hanging in there. The IOCDF has the right information, the right therapies that helped me dramatically. And I know there's some really hard times, as can't remember who it is, but some ancient theologians talked about dark nights of the soul. And there's definitely a lot of them in scrupulosity, but I am in a place that 5 years ago I couldn't even imagine being in now. So there is definitely hope out there.
Yep. Could I say one more thing, Ethan, before we jump off? And that is this: is that in this struggle, it is a struggle that is both psychological and it has those spiritual interweaves. And one thing that I would just say is, for those of you who have children or a niece or a nephew or somebody that you love, when they fall down and they hurt or they're scared or whatever, your response as a parent is to grab onto them and to hold them close, okay? To love them, okay? And when they hurt, you hurt. And so I just want to give you my frame of reference on this, and that is that when you're somebody with OCD, that God looks at you and he wants to pull you close. And he loves people with OCD. He loves people with depression. He loves. And just like I pull my daughters close and you pull other people close, we just need to just keep remembering that, to love one another, and he loves you.
Thank you so much, Ted. So thank you to my guests, Ted, Tawanna, and Micah. I can already tell you there will be a volume 2. You guys, not only Tawanna and Ted and Micah, thank you for your insight and your passion, and as well as your personal experiences and all that you do. I want to thank everybody on here for your I couldn't get to all the comments, and I know I couldn't get to all the questions. If you have questions, you can go ahead and pre-submit. For next time, we'll go ahead and get it on the schedule, hopefully for September. You can email the IOCDF at info@iocdf.org and just write, questions for religious scrupulosity. As long as we have the email up, if you need anything at all, resources, support. If you want to talk to me or email or have questions for Ted, Micah, or Tawanna, feel free to email the info@iocdf.org, and we'll make sure we get your questions to them. As always, I always encourage you to read through the comment thread. People left some great comments. There was also some great debates and some things that we may or may not have agreed with. But regardless, it was a great, open, respectful forum. So thank you for that. Finally, we have, I don't know exactly where it is, but I know we posted Tawanna is nonprofit website. So I don't remember exactly where it was, but feel free to scroll through and we will see it. So thank you for the engagement. As always, I want to thank the IOCDF and my partner behind the scenes, Fran, for doing his digital voodoo. If you haven't already and you want to be notified about all the programming the IOCDF is having over the next month, definitely be sure to subscribe and follow on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Yep, right there. Lastly, new announcement. For those of you that are still here, we will be doing a monthly. I feel really weird going from like a really, not tense, but intense conversation to be like, we're having trivia night next week. It's like, by the way, guys, let's not forget bingo every other Friday. But we loved trivia night at the conference. It was really well attended, and it was so nice to engage in the community in a way that we weren't talking about OCD. We were just doing something fun. So we talked about it, and we're going to do a trivia night once a month. We'll post more on that everywhere. We'll be giving away some prizes. It will be me and Fran behind the scenes. We had a good time collaborating on trivia before, so that will either be Wednesday or Thursday next week. Stay tuned for all the notifications. So until then, thank you for spending your evening with us. As always, you can contact the foundation at the email below. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay vigilant, feel the feels. Don't let OCD off the hook, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.